Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bonding with the Feminine. In this specific video, we're going to be discussing transition and what transition actually is when we're talking about being in labor. Transition is the specific part of labor that lies between active labor and pushing. I would say transition is one of the most vulnerable, hard, emotional, yet very liberating points of labor. It is kind of the moment where we decide, how the next phase is going to go, how are we going to get there, and what we need to release in order to get. I would say transition might be one of the least talked about points of labor, just because it is very emotional, it's uncomfortable while you're in it, and it can be uncomfortable to speak about it after the fact because labor is just a lot for any woman to process. But it is that point in time where if we're able to really lean into what we're feeling, what's coming up for us emotionally, what's coming up for us energetically, it can absolutely liberate us into the next phase of labor, which is pushing, which requires a kind of a new sense of energy, a renewed sense of energy. And it's almost like a little bit of a cleanse from all of the work that we did in early labor and active labor. So transition is that phase where we are mentally fatigued, we're physically fatigued, emotionally fatigued, energetically fatigued. We are kind of at our wit's end, we're at our breaking point. And we're worn down, and when you're worn down like that during labor, you become incredibly vulnerable. During this time, there's a lot of fears that may arise. There is the desire to quit. I can't do this. I don't want to do this anymore. There is kind of that self-doubt or negative self-talk that overtakes us. And I'm not sure if, it's different for every woman, whether it is the exhaustion or it is kind of the fear of becoming a mom, can look different for anyone. For myself specifically, if I close my eyes, I can put myself back in that birthing tub, which I spend most of my labor in when I was laboring with Sayoko. And I remember I was kind of crouched in the tub and I looked around, and all of my labor support, they were kind of staring at me, they were observing me. And I remember I had my eyes closed and I had my hand on my belly and I was just exhausted. I felt like I couldn't go another moment. I felt like if I had one more contraction come, it was going to end me. Like that was going to be it. And my midwife, she looked at me and she said, "What is it? What's wrong?" And in that moment, I knew, like, I have to release this, because this fear of being inadequate as a mom, or not being a good mom, not giving my child everything that she needed, was kind of it was in my head for felt like the last couple of hours, and I wasn't saying it, I wasn't expressing it, but it was there emotionally, and it was there energetically. I could feel it. And I expressed that. I said, "I'm scared I'm going to be a bad mom. I'm scared I'm not going to be good enough or be able to give my child everything that she needs." And my midwife looked at, she held my hand and she looked me in the eyes and she said, "The fact that you are even having this thought, that you are even thinking about this before your child is born, shows me that you are already an amazing mom, that you are already thinking of your child's needs, and you are already giving your child what she needs. Before she's even earthside, you are doing what you need to be doing." And she looked at me, I had expressed, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this. I don't know if I can do this. And she looked at me and she said, "You are already doing it. You've been doing it for the past, 12 hours. You've been in early labor, active labor. You've been doing it. You are doing it, and you're not going to quit. You're going to make it through." So in that moment, my midwife was so confident in me, in my ability to birth, and my ability to be a mom. And I started sobbing. I was just crying and crying and crying. After the tears kind of had stopped, and after I kind of, came back to that moment, came back to that reality of being in labor, things shifted immediately. I remember being in the tub and I just, the tears stopped, and I just, took some big deep breaths and brought myself back into my body, and I put my head back in the birthing pool, and within, I would say, 10 minutes, my water broke. And yes, you can be in labor, early labor, active labor, before your water breaks. Some babies are even born in the sac, but that's a side note. But my water broke 10 minutes after that release, and it felt like the fear that I was carrying of the next phase of labor, or the fear that I was carrying of the next phase of life, which was becoming a mom, it was keeping me blocked energetically and physically. And one thing I want to point out is that the cervix is a sphincter. If the cervix doesn't feel safe or relaxed, it's not going to open. So if you're holding this fear inside of your body, it's going to create like a road bump energetically and physically. And it's like, yo, our body is holding on to something that it shouldn't be, or that it no longer wants to, and we got to get rid of it. We got to get rid of it before we can. So once the water broke, and I remember laying in the tub and my water broke, and it was this big pop and this pressure that I felt, and it was like nothing I'd ever felt before. And I remember popping straight up out of the water, and I said word for word, I was like, what the fuck was that? And everyone was laughing and like, your water broke. And I was like, after I just started laughing, and after that there was this renewed sense of energy. I had a different purpose, or a new purpose, or I was just more purposeful in the way that I was being present in the moment, and refocusing my mind to really be there and birth the baby. And I was ready, I was determined, I was focused. And that's when the pushing phase came shortly after that. And that is transition. Transition is, you think of what the word transition means, that's exactly what transition is. And more or less, it is an initiation into the next phase of labor, because once you start pushing, obviously, there's no stopping, there's no going back, and it's magical. And I think that there's a lot of women who don't make it to transition, because whatever reason, whatever way your birth goes, whatever decision you choose to make in your birth, there's medical interventions that are taken for whether you're getting an epidural, or there's you stall in labor, and whoever your medical professional is thinks maybe we've waited too long, the baby needs to come out now, there's a cesarean that spot. Whatever the situation is, I think a lot of women don't make it to transition, or they don't realize that they're in transition. And not knowing what's going on when you're in transition is incredibly scary, versus if you educate yourself on the phases of labor and you're like, oh, I'm in transition, or one of your support members of your birthing team can be like, sweetie, you're in transition right now. Knowing that this is normal, this happens, and this needs to happen to kind of catapult us into the next phase, it makes a world of a difference. If I had to give any piece of advice, or multiple pieces of advice for being in transition, one of them would be, don't be afraid to be vulnerable, and don't be afraid to feel. Another one would be, instead of feeling weak for maybe being in that weak spot emotionally, physically, energetically, allow it to empower you, and allow it to be the moment where you grow. You grow as a woman, you grow as a person, you grow as a mom, you grow energetically, you grow spiritually. Allow it to be that turning point for you. The last piece of advice would to be, don't attach any shame to the breakdown. It really is, it's like an emotional breakdown, or an emotional reckoning, or hitting rock bottom. It really is equivalent to one of those, you think back in your life when you've had those emotional breakdowns or the meltdowns, and you really you hit bottom emotionally, and you're completely distraught, and you're crying, and you let it all out, but you feel better afterwards. Once the tears stop and you catch your breath and you kind of take a moment to rest, you feel better afterwards. That is transition. And instead of attaching shame to feeling like that, attach strength to being vulnerable, attach strength for being aware, attach strength for the willingness to process and release. So that is essentially transition, and kind of the short form transition, and just specifically focusing on transition. That is what it is. Physically, it's the cervix hitting full dilation point, getting ready to push. That's what the body's doing. But emotionally, it's something completely different. And one thing all of us women, it's very important that we learn and that we grasp, is that yes, growing a baby, having a baby, birthing a baby is a physical thing, obviously, but what you need to remember and not forget is that it is a physical thing that is directly attached to an emotional experience and emotional growth an energetic growth, a spiritual growth. It all coincides, it's all linked together. It is more than just the body, it is the mind, it is the energy, and it is the soul. So a little public service announcement at the end of this video. When I originally recorded it, I was very focused on the emotional breakdown that comes with transition, and I forgot to kind of touch on the physical releases that happen while we're in transition. Specifically nausea and vomiting, and also shaking and trembling. Both of those are going to be the physical kind of reactions that our body is going to have when it comes to being in transition. Vomiting is our body's natural process of getting rid of a toxin that shouldn't be there, or kind of anything in the body that's not serving us or benefiting us in that moment. And during labor, we are very vulnerable. The body's going to want to not have anything extra in there that should not be there. Along with shaking and trembling, if there's an energy or an energetic block that's in the body that's not being processed or even being recognized, we're going to shake and tremble just to kind of move the energy and release the energy. And that goes right along with the nausea and the vomiting, and also the emotional release. You may have one or the other, or both, or all three, whatever the case may be for you. All of them are normal, and there is no reason to fear any one of them.